There is a story that circulates in the same corners of the internet as the others. The idea that somewhere in the Sumerian record, a tablet describes the sky not as open space, but as a physical ceiling, a solid barrier stretched over the earth with something waiting on the other side of it. Videos built around this idea usually presented as a hidden discovery, a forbidden translation, proof that the ancients knew something modern science has missed. Today we're going to walk through where this idea actually comes from, what ancient peoples really believed about the sky, how that relates, and does not relate, to Islamic teaching, and where the dome story stops being history and starts being internet legend. Before we go further, I want to be completely upfront with you about what this video is and is not. This is not a claim that a specific verified Sumerian tablet exists describing a physical ceiling over the earth with something living above it. No such single artifact has been documented by any credible institution. What we're exploring today is something more interesting and more honest, a real, well-documented ancient belief that the sky was a solid structure held by multiple ancient civilizations, layered on top of a modern legend that has exaggerated and reshaped that belief into something it never was. I'll flag each piece as we go, so you always know whether you're hearing something documented, something theorized, something specific to a particular ancient tradition, or something that is simply legend. Let's start with what is actually verified. Ancient Mesopotamian cosmology, the way Sumerians and later Babylonians pictured the structure of the universe, did include the idea of a solid sky. This is real, established scholarship, not speculation. Cuneiform cosmological texts describe the heavens as layered, physical, and in some readings made of stone or metal, held up and separated from the earth below. The most detailed surviving account of this comes from a real, well-known text, the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enuma Elish, dated to roughly the 2nd millennium before the Common Era, which describes the god Marduk splitting the body of the primordial being Tiamat in two, using one half to form the sky as a kind of ceiling holding back cosmic waters above, and the other half to form the earth. That text is genuine, it has been translated, it is held in real museum collections including the British Museum, and it is taught in university courses on ancient Near Eastern religion. None of that is in dispute. What's also genuinely documented is that this idea of a solid sky was not unique to Mesopotamia. It shows up in a related form in the ancient Hebrew text of Genesis, where the sky is called the Raqia, a Hebrew word that most scholars translate as something firm, beaten out, or hammered flat, describing an actual physical expanse separating waters above from waters below. Biblical scholars have long noted the resemblance between this Genesis language and the older Mesopotamian cosmology that surrounded the region where these texts were written. This is a real, mainstream area of comparative religious scholarship, not a fringe theory, and it simply reflects that ancient peoples across the ancient Near East, working without telescopes or any way to observe the true structure of the atmosphere, generally pictured the sky as something solid rather than as open space. I want to pause here and be direct about something, because this is exactly the point where a video like this can drift into territory that misrepresents Islamic teaching if we're not careful. The Quran does describe the heavens, Sama, in the plural samawat, and speaks of 7 heavens, and uses language describing the sky as something raised without visible pillars, and as something held from falling except by Allah's permission. These are matters of Islamic belief regarding the unseen, and Muslims accept them as revealed truth from the Quran. But it would be a serious mistake, and one this video is not going to make, to treat this as the same category of claim as ancient Mesopotamian mythology, or to suggest the Quran is simply borrowing or confirming the pagan cosmology of Babylon or Sumer. The Quran is Islamic scripture, a source of revealed guidance, not an ancient Near Eastern nature myth about a god cutting apart the body of a sea monster to build the sky. Scholars of Islamic theology have historically been careful to separate revealed descriptions of the heavens from questions of physical cosmology in the modern scientific sense, and this video follows that same caution rather than collapsing scripture and mythology into one undifferentiated story. With that boundary clearly marked, let's return to what's actually interesting here from a historical and textual standpoint, because there is something real and worth understanding at the center of this. even once you strip away the modern legend built on top of it. The ancient Mesopotamian sky as ceiling concept was not a single unified belief even within Mesopotamia itself. Sumerian sources, which predate the Babylonian Enuma Elish by well over 1,000 years, describe the sky using the term An, a word that also names the sky god, An, and Sumerologists have noted that Sumerian cosmological references to the heavens are often brief, embedded in hymns and god lists, rather than laid out as a systematic description of layered structure. The fully developed, multi-layered heaven and underworld cosmology, with the sky described as tiered levels of increasingly solid material, is a later development, more fully worked out in Babylonian and subsequent Akkadian texts than in the earliest Sumerian sources. This is a real documented pattern in the history of Mesopotamian religion. The cosmology got more elaborate over time, as later scribes and priesthoods systematized older material. And it means the popular claim that the Sumerians specifically wrote a detailed dome cosmology text is an overstatement of what the earliest sources actually contain. That precision matters, and a responsible account of this material has to include it rather than flatten 1,000 years of religious development into a single tablet. So, where does the dome legend, the version you'll find across video after video, actually come from? And where does it depart from the documented history? This is the point where I have to be explicit. This next part is legend, not scholarship, and it is not supported by any verified ancient source. The modern legend takes the real, documented idea of a solid sky and adds 3 things to it that no ancient Mesopotamian text supports. First, it claims the ancients described the ceiling as something that could open on a schedule or under specific conditions. No cuneiform text makes this claim. Second, it claims the ancients described something specific, living or waiting above the ceiling, watching or guarding it. This does not appear in the Enuma Elish, in Sumerian god lists, or in any cataloged cosmological text. It is a modern narrative addition. Third, and most importantly, the legend usually claims this information comes from a specific tablet that has been suppressed, mistranslated on purpose, or kept out of public view by an unnamed museum or academic establishment. This claim of deliberate suppression is the recurring engine of nearly every video in this genre, and it is, without exception, in the cases that can actually be checked, unsupported by anything in the real cuneiform record. Real Mesopotamian cosmological texts are published, translated, cross-referenced, and taught openly. There is no hidden tablet describing a dome that opens. What actually happened, historically, is far less dramatic and far more human. Ancient peoples across the ancient Near East, lacking any means to observe the true nature of the atmosphere, reasonably concluded from what they could see. The blue color of the daytime sky, the way rain falls as if released from above, the visible dome-like appearance of the horizon, that the sky must be a physical structure holding something back. This is not a secret. It's found in openly published academic work on ancient cosmology, and it's one of the most ordinary, well-attested features of how ancient religious thought tried to explain the natural world before the tools of modern astronomy existed. So, where does that leave us? With a genuine, documented ancient belief, real texts, real translations, a real and traceable line of development from early Sumerian references to the fully developed Babylonian sky cosmology of the Enuma Elish, wrapped in a much larger modern legend that adds suppression, secrecy, and something waiting above the ceiling, none of which appears in any actual ancient source. That layering is common in how these stories spread online. A real, modest historical fact about ancient cosmology gets picked up, dramatized, and eventually presented as a suppressed discovery, when the honest version is simply the story of how early civilizations tried to make sense of the sky above them with the tools they had. It's worth adding one more point of context, because it matters for how this material should be understood rather than misunderstood. The reason mainstream Assyriology doesn't treat the Enuma Elish or Sumerian sky references as a forbidden text is straightforward. They were never hidden. They've been part of the public academic record since their translation in the 19th and 20th centuries, discussed in museum catalogs, university courses, and published books available to anyone. What separates real scholarship from the online legend isn't secrecy, it's precision. Real scholarship draws a careful line between what a specific ancient text actually says and what later interpreters, ancient or modern, have added to it. The legend erases that line. This video is trying to keep it. We're not here to tell you that a hidden tablet describes a ceiling over the earth that opens on a schedule, and we're not here to tell you something is waiting above it. What we can tell you, with confidence, is that ancient Mesopotamian civilizations really did believe the sky was a solid structure, that this belief is documented across real translated texts, including the Enuma Elish, that it developed and became more elaborate over centuries rather than appearing fully formed in a single early source, and that its resemblance to the Firmament language in Genesis reflects a well-studied shared cultural context in the ancient Near East. Everything beyond that, a dome that opens, something behind it, a suppressed translation, belongs to legend, not history, and it's important to say so plainly rather than let the line blur. If this kind of thread interests you, where a real, well-documented ancient belief ends and modern legend picks up the story and runs much further with it, that's exactly the kind of thing worth reading about, directly from serious source material on Mesopotamian cosmology and the Enuma Elish, rather than taking any single retelling, including this one, as the final word. The ancients looked up at a sky they had no way to measure, and they built an explanation for it out of the materials they understood: stone, metal, water held back by a ceiling. Some of what they wrote down survived. Some of it was reshaped by later scribes into something more elaborate. And a great deal of what circulates about it today was never written by them at all. It was written about them centuries later by people telling a very different kind of story. Whether that's disappointing or not is up to you. But it's the honest version. And honestly, it might be the more interesting one.